Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Renew. I'm Pastor Tony Cowan. Thanks for joining us, and let's get right to the point today. We are talking about trusting God, trusting in the Lord. In fact, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, as we've already read, tells us that we're to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not to our own understanding. Well, how do we come to that place of being able to trust in the Lord with all of our heart? Well, again, trust is a relationship issue. Trust is a belief in someone's reliance, in their honesty, and their goodness. It is confidence in their character. In other words, what's on the inside of them. So the more you know a person, the more you're going to be able to trust that person. The more we know God, know that He is love, that He is good, that He's gracious and merciful, that He's faithful, the more we're going to be in a position to be able to trust Him with all of our heart. Now, we talked about David yesterday, a man that was after God's own heart. That was according to what God said about him. He was the one who trusted God, but probably more than anybody else in the Old Testament, he knew God. He knew what was inside of God. He majored and focused on God's goodness and His loving kindness and mercies and all those other attributes of God. And that's what caused him to be able to trust in God. And that's why God was able to use him as mightily as He did. Now, there's another psalm we were going to go to today, Psalm 112, one of my favorite psalms. Psalm 112, also written by David. We're not going to be able to read the whole thing, of course, because of this, we just don't have time for that. But we're going to hit some highlights here, and I believe you'll be able to see this, and you can go study it out on your own after we get through the podcast today. But verse number 1, Psalm 112 and verse 1, it says, "Praise the Lord. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in His commandments." Now, when the Old Testament particularly talks about someone who is fearing the Lord, that doesn't mean that they're afraid of God, that they're scared of God. That's not what this means. That's not the way that this word fear is used here. This word fear here actually means to reverence, to respect, to honor. It actually includes the word trust there. In fact, we could almost read it that way. Blessed is the man who trusts the Lord and who delights greatly in His commandments. Now, he goes on to describe this particular person, but we're going to jump on down to verse number 6. Verse 6 says, "Surely this man who trusts in the Lord, he will never be shaken." In other words, no matter really what happens on the outside, on the inside, he is unshakable. You know, there's things on the outside that affect all of us that we face in life that can shake us up. But on the inside, there should be an anchor on the inside of us, that trusting in the Lord. Yes, our soul, our emotions, our flesh come in contact with a lot of scary things. But like David said, he said, "When I am afraid, I will trust in the Lord." He said, this man will never be shaken. He goes on to say, the righteous will be in everlasting remembrance. Verse 7 says, he will not be afraid of evil tidings. Now, evil, we don't use that word evil tidings. That means bad news, all right? He will not be afraid when bad news comes his way. When he is hearing bad news, he's not going to be afraid of that. Why? Because that anchor is inside. That trust in the Lord is on the inside of him. It goes on to say his heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Notice that. What makes a heart steadfast? What makes it stable? What makes it unshakable? It's the fact that that heart is trusting in the Lord. So in other words, no matter what you see, no matter the way you feel on the outside, and again, we're not talking about denial. David didn't live a life of denial. No man of faith ever lived a life of denial, but there's something on the inside that's greater than what's on the outside. There's something that we believe in that's greater, more stable, that's far better than the things that we are experiencing in life. And that's what we always pull into. Even though we may have times of fear on the outside in our minds and our emotions, those kind of things, go through scary times in life, we need to understand that we need to pull back in, draw up from the inside and say, I'm trusting in the Lord here. I'm not going to be afraid of this situation. The Lord is for me, so who can be against me? It goes on in verse number 8 and says, his heart is established. It is established. He will not be afraid until he sees his desire upon his enemies. See, the heart is really where we live anyway. You don't live in your intellectual mind, in your natural mind. You don't live, of course, in your flesh. You live out of your heart. And Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, that says that out of the heart flow the issues of life. So if we have that trust in the Lord in our hearts, no matter what we see, no matter what we go through, we're not going to be afraid of things. We're not going to be shaken up. We're not going to lose our cool. We're going to maintain our peace through those things because we've learned to trust in the Lord. Now, I said to learn to trust in the Lord, and it is a learning process. You're not going to get there overnight. You come to know God a little at a time, a little bit of understanding at a time, and that's the way also you'll come to trust the Lord. As you walk with Him, as you see He's faithful, as you see He's dependable, reliable, He's not going to let you down, even in the worst situations, you're going to be able to draw back and say, you know what, I've been through this before. I've seen stuff before. I've had challenges. I've had adversity in life, but I trust in the Lord. I choose to trust in the Lord with all of my heart, and God's going to see me through this situation. Well, that's good right there, isn't it? Well, that's all the time I've got for today. Join us again tomorrow if you like additional resources and materials. Go to tonycowan.org. We'll see you tomorrow.